Hi, I'm Colleen. I'm here again with the Integrated HPS grant, and I'm really excited to be talking to Dr. Alan Love today. He's the John M. Dolan Professor of Philosophy at the Minnesota Center for Philosophy of Science at the University of Minnesota, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with him today. So we can get started, if that's good with you, an area work like that. And if you wouldn't mind me asking too, how did you kind of get interested in philosophy of science and history of philosophy of science coming from a science background? That's really kind of a cool pathway to this type of research.
So I very much backed into it almost accidentally. So I was studying molecular biology and genetics and really wanted to minor in something else as an undergraduate. Actually had pursued a music minor for a little bit of time before giving that up, and decided on a whim, and by on a whim, I mean in my own mind, when I go back to that time, I can think of no good reason why I did it, decided to sign up for a minor in philosophy at the beginning of my junior year. So I've gone through 2 full years of undergrad, not taken any philosophy, and thought, this looks interesting, maybe I'll try it. And so my classes were very standard. It was an introductory logic class and an introduction to philosophy. And I think I failed my first paper in the introduction to philosophy class. It was on Spinoza's ethics, so maybe I don't need to be blamed for that. But
so that's a difficult first paper. Oh my gosh, I don't think mine was on that. I'm pretty sure my first philosophy paper was like defining the categorical imperative or something. Not that.
Oh, that could be its own challenge too. But anyway, so I was just very interested, and I think that what happened was I had come to an increasing realization that I didn't want to continue in laboratory science. Yeah. However, I found the intellectual environment very stimulating, and that began to be philosophy where that was happening more than it was the sciences. And it wasn't until I was finishing up as a senior that I really bumped into philosophy of science, because the courses that I had were not philosophy of science courses. They were very standard political philosophy and early modern and things like that, which I found interesting. But then all of a sudden somebody's pointing me in the direction of philosophy of biology, and I thought, hey, that might be exactly what I'm interested in. And from there, it really did pick up momentum, and led to my going back to the graduate program at the University of Pittsburgh in history and philosophy of science.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. That's a really awesome path towards it. Funny, it's kind of similar to me. I won't take up too much time with this, but yeah, I was a chemistry major and did lab science, and really impulsively decided to do philosophy. And my first class was philosophy of science, and now I'm here, so it works. It out.
It happens. One can fall in.
Yeah, I think I always found it cool because I think I realized philosophy of science kind of does what I growing up kind of thought science did. I just never really got the day-to-day lab as much as philosophy of science. That's really cool. That I'm wondering just, if you have any general pieces of advice for anybody watching who's new to philosophy or might be interested in getting into philosophy, or just younger in their career starting grad school. If you had one big piece of advice you would want to give anybody, what would that be?
So I would say that at an early stage of grad school, read widely. Very quickly, you will be channeled into a dissertation project that will force you deep. And so at that early stage, one of the best things you can do is go wide, because what you will find is that you're constrained quite tightly when you're writing the dissertation to stay focused. And so at an early stage, if possible, read widely, read outside of particular areas that you think you're interested in. Maybe take a seminar that's a stretch beyond what you would normally do. I sort of remember my first year of grad school, I took a seminar on philosophy of quantum mechanics. I don't do quantum mechanics. I don't sort of have any aspirations in that direction, right? But it was the right time to do it because I certainly was not going to be reading and thinking about quantum mechanics when I was writing my dissertation on evolution and development. So, so I think that's an important piece. I think that the second piece of advice that I would offer is network. And that comes in a variety of different ways, but probably most naturally from simply being present at conferences and places where work is presented. So I'm a big fan of people going to conferences at an early stage of their career, even if they're not necessarily presenting a paper. Now, I know that that can present financial difficulties. Some departments don't support that. But the idea is you really learn something distinctive by getting into the environment and rubbing sort of elbows with people in that setting that's just completely different than you get in a home department graduate program setting where people do most of their growing and developing as scholars. So I would say, if you can, that networking in person. Obviously, there's lots of ways that networking can happen online now. There's some additional strategies that make that possible. But I would say, once vaccines become widely available and implemented for COVID and conferences start opening up again, that's a great place for the, aspiring graduate student to locate themselves, both to stimulate their own thinking about the topics that are of interest to them, but also simply to recognize that you're in a community of other people doing like-minded projects, and you have lots of things to learn from them because they're not the same as you. And that can be really crucial sometimes, because graduate programs of particular departments can have a flavor to them. And you come out of your graduate department and you go, wow, they do things really differently over there.
Yeah.
And I think you shouldn't have that experience after you finish your PhD and get a job. You should have that experience much earlier, because it's actually quite beneficial to you in your own intellectual development to be able to recognize those differences. Not because it's going to change you. You might actually say, all right, that's different, but I don't want to work that way. I like the way I work. That's fine, but you're aware that there's a different way to work. So I guess, in sum, both of my recommendations have to do with kind of keeping yourself open to recognizing that there's a wider space of ideas and topics than just what will be in your dissertation. And there's a lot to be learned from engaging with other scholars, and especially those who might not operate according to the way that you are most familiar from your own graduate program.
Thank you for that. That was really great advice. I really appreciate it. I'm sure anybody who's watching who's in a similar situation will also really appreciate it.